Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Wraith. I'm the Quality, Health, Safety and Environmental Manager for Lavendon Access Services. That is the operating arm of Nationwide Platforms, Panther Platforms and EPL Skylift. What I'm here to do today is to talk to you about, are your MEWPs safe? I could say how long is a piece of string in some ways. We could talk for all day about the subject. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just specify what a MEWP is, what we are actually talking about when we talk about a MEWP, touch on the legislation surrounding MEWPs and the guidance that's available, what needs to be in place to ensure MEWPs are safe, and then a summary of the talk and a look at a few slides of what happens when things don't quite go to plan. So what is a MEWP? Well, a MEWP is a mobile elevated work platform. And the pictures you see before you there definitely are not MEWPs. They are pictures of people putting their lives at risk, attempting to work at height, but they are definitely not MEWPs. A MEWP is a safe working platform. It is a safe method of providing temporary working at height for people, tools and equipment. And as you can see, the key words there are underlined. A safe method, temporary platform for people, tools and equipment. MEWPs come in all shapes and sizes, and there's hundreds of different types out there made by numerous manufacturers. And ISO 16368 and EN 280, the design standards for MEWPs, have put them into clear classifications. So when we talk about MEWPs, we can identify them into two clear groups. Group A is where the MEWP lifts vertically straight up and has very little outreach at all. It may have an end extending deck, but the structure of the machine, the projection, does not go outside the tipping lines. So basically, that's machines that go straight up and down. Group B MEWPs are MEWPs with outreach, typically your boom type machines where they go up and you can go out and extend out, and the center of gravity can extend outside the tipping lines of the base. Within those two groups, Group A and Group B, there are different types of MEWPs. And Type 1 is where the MEWP has to be fully closed down to be able to be driven around. Type 3 is where the MEWP can be travelled with the platform raised in the air. So if you looked at a Type 1 machine, a Group B1 or a 1B, that would be possibly a truck-mounted vehicle, a boom with jack legs or outriggers, whereas a 3B would be some kind of boom which you can drive around with the boom elevated. I kind of look upon that as being the metric description. In the olden days, when I can remember MEWPs were known as scissors, booms, cherry pickers, flying carpets. And they come, as I said, they come in all shapes and sizes, and they're used across all business sectors and all parts of the industry. From little small ones, these are just two examples of the many types that are out there. This type of machine has become far more popular since 2005 with the introduction of the work at height regulations. More commonly you see booms and scissors of this type here where they go from somewhere near 25, 30 feet and there are now even self-propelled booms which go up to 135 feet. And then you've got your truck mounted and your van mounted machines as well. And as you can see there, they're used in all different sectors of industries, from construction, and mainly in construction to start with, but they are being used throughout every industry now as their benefits are being realised. So go back to the question, now we know what a MEWP is. Are MEWPs safe? Yes, coming from the largest access company, powered access company in Europe, I'm bound to say yes, MEWPs are safe. But it's a bit like saying, is your car safe? Well, yes, your car is safe as long as it's used correctly and maintained correctly. So I would say exactly the same with MEWPs. MEWPs, yes, they are safe if they're maintained and used correctly. How can I say that MEWPs are safe? Well, there is definite evidence to prove this. Back in 2007-8, Crown House Engineering did a work study on low-level access, and a gentleman called Jerry Mulholland produced a report which showed that low-level powered access improved productivity by about 3 times over types of access used at low levels, such as podiums and taffel towers. MEWPS are safe and the safest and most efficient means of providing temporary work at height. That is reinforced by the HSE. You look at their guidance and their reference documentation, and it says, and in fact they recommend, where working at a height and you need temporary access, MEWPS should be one of the first considerations. MEWPS have helped reduce the number of fatalities from falls from height. If you look at the number of falls from height back in the early 90s, it was somewhere in the region of 90 fatalities a year. That has now reduced dramatically and is down somewhere in the region of about, I think, 38 for 2009-10. And if you look at the fall in falls from height, the fall in the number of fatalities from work at height, and then you look at the number of MEWPs that are actually being used in those periods, in the early 90s, there weren't very many MEWPs at all. In around 2000, that number grew from a few to about 15,000. And back in 2010, there was about 45,000 MEWPs available for use in the industry, so for work at height. So you can see that where the number of deaths has reduced, the number of MEWPs has increased. And there's more trained operators and managers than at any other time. The International Powered Access Federation, back in early 2000, they trained about, I believe it was somewhere in the region of 13,000 operators. That number has grown, and last year, 2010, IPAF trained over 84,000 operators. So there are more people skilled to use these machines than there were at any other time. And it's not just to operate them, there are courses out there for people who manage, supervise the use of these machines as well. And there's clear evidence to show that accidents can be reduced if MEWPs are used correctly and best practice is followed. But there is one proviso as well. We're actually using these machines in far more challenging situations than we were a few years ago. The example there of using MEWPs being balanced on the end of a stick 135 feet up in the air is a dangerous occupation, and has to make sure that the machine is very safe, and that the way you use it, you follow all the best practices and guidance. So yes, MEWPs are safe, but it depends on how they're used. And unfortunately, things do go wrong, and when they do go wrong, it has serious consequences. Between 2003 and 2010, there have been 15 fatalities using MEWPs. 10 of those have been with booms, and 5 of those have been with scissors. And with the accident investigations that have followed serious incidents and fatalities, it's been clearly identified there is a number of key points where failings have occurred. These are not by any means all of them, but these are the major ones. Inadequate route planning. People just jump on the machines and they will drive them somewhere without thinking where they're driving it. And they drive near overhead structures, over uneven ground, and it causes serious problems. Incorrect MEWP selection is another serious problem, where there's a machine there that works at height, I'll jump on it, I'll borrow it, and it's not the best machine for the job. Driving across uneven ground has serious consequences as well. If you're in a boom and you're on the end of a stick 10 or 15 meters away from the wheels and you go over a small bump, well, that is exaggerated, and these MEWPs can have a catapulting effect if you're in a drive over uneven ground. Poor visibility. People working in the tops of roof structures and places which are dimly lit, that has been shown to be a cause of accidents in the past. Insufficient familiarization. People expected to use these things without actually being shown how the controls work or knowing how to use them, and moving the wrong control in the wrong direction. That has serious consequences as well. Distractions while operating. People who get distracted, they use their mobile phone, they're thinking about where they're going to go to. One of the problems with these machines is they don't have a dedicated operator all of the time. They are used by people on occasions when they need to get to a height to do a specific job, by electricians, by steel erectors, by joiners, by all sorts of trades. But it isn't their dedicated trade. And sometimes they get distracted. They think of what they're supposed to be doing, fixing the next fuse box, rather than actually operating the machine. Placing objects on the control panels, that has caused problems as well. And movements of the boom have happened because people have put a device or a ratchet spanner on the control panel, and it has accidentally telescoped the machine out or moved the machine unexpectedly. Inappropriate drive speeds. These machines have elevated drive speeds, which reduces the drive speed. But when they're closed down, you can drive them at high speed. And again, you can drive them over rough ground, be catapulted out. So whenever you're driving them, you should drive at speeds appropriate to the conditions. And believe it or not, also, one of the causes of accidents is people actually overriding the safety devices provided with these machines. These machines have no end of safety devices built in, but people, believe it or not, override them. So what legislation do we look to guide us on how to use MEWPS safely? Well, the key one, there's three key pieces. One of the ones I'm going to highlight is the provision and use of work equipment regulations. Came out in 1998, and it talks about the suitability of the work equipment. It talks about maintaining the work equipment and inspecting it before and during use. It makes sure that before you use any work equipment, you have the correct planning, and you provide information, instruction and training to those who are going to use it. LOLA, the lifting operational lifting equipment regulations, again 1998, talks about the strength and suitability of lifting equipment. Have you got the right piece of lifting equipment for the job? Is it going to have the capacity to do what you want to do with it? Is it clearly marked with the safe working load, the maximum number of people, the wind speeds it can operate in? So it has to have definite, clear, key safety critical information available with the lifting equipment. Does the lifting equipment have a thorough examination inspection? And for MEWPS, that is within the last 6 months as a maximum. The people using your lifting equipment and planning the lifting equipment, are they competent? And is the operation planned, and are suitable records kept? And the Work at Height Regulations 2005 says those who are going to plan and organise and manage the work at height have to be competent, and there's an avoidance hierarchy, and selection and inspection of work equipment for work at height is critical. And if you start to look through those three key bits of legislation, there are some key messages that come out throughout them all. You have to make sure that the work at height and the use of the MEWP is planned correctly. You choose the right piece of work equipment. You inspect that work equipment before you use it, and those who are going to use it are competent to use it. So let's go and look at the first of those key four messages there. The planning the use of the work equipment. The planning of the use of the MEWP. In Lavendon Access Services, we have over 12,000 MEWPs on hire, and believe it or not, our average lead time from the customer placing the order to expecting the machine to be delivered to his site is 1.5 days. How much planning has gone into that? How many people think at the last minute we need to get up there, how are we going to get up there, or we'll use a cherry picker? Well, that shouldn't be the situation. Work at height should be planned well in advance, so you make sure you're taking into consideration all the factors needed to work safely at height. So what should you be considering in the planning? Well, it's not just the task you're going to do and the hazards around that task and putting control measures for the task you're going to do, but it's thinking the broader, bigger picture. What about the delivery of that MEWP? Where's it going to be delivered to on site? Or don't have anywhere on site for it to be delivered, and it has to be delivered on the roadway? Who's responsible for that? You, as inviting or hiring that machine to be delivered, you have a responsibility to make sure where you're delivering it, it can be delivered safely and collected when you finish with it. And in the meantime, when you're using the MEWP, what about the security of that machine? When it's not being used at night or during the day, you are the responsible. You, the hirer, would be responsible, or the user of the MEWP would be responsible for making sure that machine is secure. and where you're going to use the MEWP, where you're going to drive it. Has someone done a ground assessment to make sure the ground can support the weight of the machine? Some of these machines are weighing 30, 40 tons nowadays, and you've got to make sure that the ground that you are going to put it on, it can support the load. The duration of the use of the MEWP as well. If it's only going to be used for a day, should that be any different to using it for a large number of weeks? If you're using it for just one day, well, probably security isn't such a bigger issue as using it every day. But how many people are going to use that machine? And what about the training and the familiarisation of those people on a daily basis? What about emergency planning and communicating that emergency plan to the people who are going to use it for the full duration of its use? So you've got to consider duration, emergency planning and communication plans. And the movement of the MEWP and the movement of other people and the movement of other plant around site and the interaction between all of those has to be considered, as well as personal protective equipment. And what personal protective equipment should be used in a MEWP? Well, I think again we could have a whole talk on that. But it is recommended that full body harness with a work restraint lanyard that prevents anybody getting into a position where they can fall should be used in every type of MEWP and every type of boom MEWP. And then scissors, it is down to risk assessment. But that will include the use of MEWPs on many occasions, use of harnesses on many occasions. So moving on to selection. Obviously they haven't selected the right machine there. They could have had a better choice. But the reason I've put that one there is because on a building site you use many applications for a MEWP. And you have to make a decision of, do you have a different MEWP for every type of job? Or do you kind of have a compromise where instead of ordering one MEWP and then off-hiring it the next day and then getting another one in which does a different job, you have a compromise. And sometimes compromise leads to accidents happening in this kind of situation. As I say, there are about 40,000 MEWPs in use now. That is slightly down from 45,000 in 2010. But MEWP selection, again, we could do a whole talk on MEWP selection. When you're going to use this MEWP, how are you going to get it to the site? Do you have any obstructions you have to get through, over or around? Narrow doorways, gateways, ground conditions, they all have to be taken into consideration. If you're going to take it over soft ground, does it need to be a track machine or a wheeled machine? And if you are going to use it on soft ground, should it have outriggers to extend the footprint and give it a lower ground pressure? And if you are going to use machines with outriggers and jack legs, do they come with spreader plates and are they the right size spreader plates? What about the safe working load, the maximum number of people that you can use the machine for, that machine can be used with? The middle picture at the top there actually shows a MEWP which is balancing on a garden fence because the operator overloaded the basket and it tilted over sideways and went slightly down very slowly but rested on the fence. The other end of that picture, which I haven't shown you, is a truck-mounted MEWP balancing on two wheels. What about the working envelope of the MEWP? Different MEWPs go to different heights and different outreaches, different configurations. So make sure you know how high and how far your MEWP can reach, and it can reach where you want to get to. The top right-hand picture shows a MEWP with a fly jib. So if you need to get into awkward places, do you need something that can get up, over and back down? Does the basket have swivel potential to get into real awkward positions? And when you're going to use this MEWP, what about accessories? Are you going to put pipe work in it? Are you going to use other materials in there? Do you need something to make those materials safe and secure, stop them rolling around? There's 101 considerations when you start talking about MEWP selection, and every one has to be considered to make sure you get the right selection. So we've now planned the use of the MEWP. We've inspected we've selected the right machine. And by the way, if you're not sure about which machine to select, feel free to contact hire companies who will quite willingly come out and help do a site survey for you and recommend the type of MEWPs that you should be using. So you've now got the MEWP and you're going to use this machine. The next key thing and the critical thing you have to do is make sure you've got the correct inspection processes in place. And that would start with making sure the machine has a current thorough examination certification. And as I've already said, that will be current within the last 6 months as a minimum. And on the certification, you will actually find that the person who's inspected it, the competent person, may have put some comments. And if they're Category A comments, they make sure that the defects that are mentioned in there have been addressed and rectified before you use that machine. So it's not just a matter of saying, yes, it's got a certificate of thorough examination. Have a detailed look at it, make sure it's the right certificate for the right machine, and there are no outstanding defects on that machine, on that thorough examination report. So you're now going to use this machine. You've got to make sure someone's going to do the daily pre-use checks. Who's going to do those? Are they competent to do them? Do they know what to look for? Well, it tells you all that in the manual, what to look for and where to look. But it's not just about the daily inspections. There's also intermediate inspections on a weekly basis, on a regular basis following that. If you've got a machine on long-term use, don't think that just doing a daily check is sufficient. As I said, there's intermediate inspections. And when you've done those inspections, what happens if you find a defect? What do you do with that? Do you have a defect reporting system in place? Right at the top on the right-hand side is an example of one way of showing where the machine has had a thorough examination. It's a little disc and it's pointing to a month of the year, and it says 2011, and that identifies when that machine had its last thorough examination. The two slides to the bottom on your left show an example of a check card for daily daily checks. That was designed and devised through Lavendon, with working closely with some of its hire companies it hires too, some of the end users, and we've come up with a dedicated checklist there which can be used for the majority of MEWPS. On the back of the checklist, it also has a daily sign-off, a weekly sign-off, and it also has a log, so you can log defects and trace them right through to the end of the hire. You should have some kind of system like that in place. And then don't forget, with your inspections, there's maintenance. Maintenance of machines is everybody's responsibility. We don't expect you to take a grease gun to this machine, but if you're going to hire a machine for a long period of time, you need to make sure, if you're going to hire a machine, that maintenance is going to take place at the appropriate times, and you're going to make that machine available for maintenance and inspections. So there is the need to consider the maintenance as well. So then we come on to competence. The person using the machine, are they competent to use it? Well, what is competence? In my mind, competence is theoretical knowledge, practical knowledge, and experience of using the machine. So where do you get the theoretical knowledge from? I've already said that IPAF in 2010 did over 84,000 operator training courses. And currently there are, believe it or not, 360,000 people out there with a current IPAF operator's license. But there's not just operators courses, there's demonstrator courses, there's MEWPS for managers courses, and IPAF are the industry leaders in these type of courses, but there are other people who do courses as well. And then there's familiarization. Before you use the MEWP, or before you ask someone to use that MEWP, make sure they are familiarizing how to use that machine. Make sure they know how the manufacturer recommends it should be used and what warning signs mean. Make sure they know the feature of the specific model, and they know how the control functions work, which goes up, which goes down, which telescopes out, which telescopes in, where the stop button is, not just at the platform controls, but the ground controls. And make sure they're very familiar with the safety devices, the emergency stops, the tilt alarms, the elevated drive speeds, and the emergency lowering procedures. And all that information can be found, as I say, in the operator's manual. But if you want more detailed than just reading the manual, to contact your hire companies, and they will come out there and give you familiarization. But the other thing about familiarization is when the machine is delivered, the person who takes ownership of the first day may not be the person who uses it for the coming weeks. Somebody else may jump on it one day down the line. So you've got to consider familiarising them as well and allowing them time to get familiar with the machine. Familiarisation is a very big issue. And then you come to experience of using the MEWP. Using the MEWP. How do you know somebody is experienced to use that machine? Well, IPAF produce a logbook, and if you get your users to record their experience in that logbook, you can then measure their experience over a period of time and demonstrate their competence. How do I know people aren't familiar with machines? We at Lavendon have a technical services department, and we analyse the breakdowns, all the breakdowns that are reported through that centre. And 30% of all breakdowns reported to Lavendon on the hire of their machines are down in some way to what we classify as operator error. And if you actually look at the three bottom figures there, the 4.4% machine damage, the 7.9% no fault found, and the 9.2% operator error, that adds up somewhere in the region of 20% of customer fault breakdowns with machines are down to misuse and the customer just basically not knowing how to use the machine. So back to the question, are your MEWPs safe? Well, that depends on you. I'm sure you're all aware of Heinrich's domino theory, where if there is an unsafe act, it can cause an accident and result in injury. Well, I have the same belief with the safe use of MEWPs. You have to make sure you get the risk assessment right. You have to spend a lot of time planning the use of the MEWP. Make sure you select the right MEWP and make sure you have the correct inspection processes in place, competent people to do the planning, supervision and management and operation. But also don't just trust that the guy will use it safely. Make sure you supervise him as well. And if you can get all those key factors in place, then the safe use of MEWPs is more than hopefully guaranteed. But I said I would show you in the last couple of minutes a couple of examples of where things have gone wrong. This one is a failure to plan correctly. The machine wasn't planned to reach that access there at height. If they'd needed to get up there, they should have used a bigger machine, better machine selection. Damage to the path here. The machine there that's damaged the path weighs 6 tons. A little tracked, narrow machine, which weighs about 2 tons, could have given the same reach, but would have done none of the damage. Are those guys competent to use that machine? Should they be carrying that pipe like that? Should they have a different type of machine to do that particular job? All issues where it highlights the failure in the planning and selection and use process. And unfortunately, this was a serious incident where someone didn't identify that there was a manhole cover and the machine got driven onto the manhole cover. Part of the planning, if you're going to use machines, should be looking at drainage plans. If there's a manhole cover, make sure it's highlighted and protected. Security of machines. This machine wasn't properly secured and the consequences you can see for yourself. So there's lots of issues around the safe use of MEWPs. And I said right at the beginning, safe use of MEWPs, is your car safe to use? If you get the things correctly, safe in processes safe and correct in place, then your MEWP is safe to use. And we could go through each one of those in turn, but we've already covered quite a lot of those there. So MEWPs are safe if used correctly, if planned for, correct selection, correct inspection, and used by competent people. And where do you find information on that? If I had 1 minute to recommend 3 bits of guidance, I would recommend these 3 bits of guidance. There is the CIS guidance note for construction on your left-hand side, the BS 8460, the Safe Use of MEWPs Code of Practice, and a guidance which has just recently come out from the Strategic Forum on the overhead trapping and crushing of injuries to people in platforms. If you read nothing else, read those 3 bits of documentation. Thank you very much.